When we talk about a traditional career path, there is this underlying expectation of structural integrity. You are essentially walking into a skyscraper.
Right. It's entirely pre-engineered. You walk into the lobby on day one, the elevator is, already calibrated, and you just push the button for your floor.
Exactly. The accounting department is safely on floor 4, marketing is on 10, HR is on 12. The scaffolding is just built for you.
Yeah, we like knowing exactly where the walls are. We like knowing what the temperature is going to be and who is in charge of fixing the plumbing when a pipe inevitably bursts.
Right. But then you step out into the world of working for yourself, and suddenly that entire skyscraper just vanishes. I mean, we are looking at a professional landscape that is nothing more than an empty plot of land.
And it is raining.
Yeah, pouring. It is the absolute definition of bill it yourself or stand in the rain. So today, we are unpacking this massive 500-point tactical masterclass on how to actually survive that rain.
And it's a fascinating set of sources, really.
It is. We're not just looking at how to, cobble together a gig or file a 1099. We're unpacking the complete metamorphosis required to transform from a general worker, someone who just executes tasks on floor 10 of the skyscraper, into a high-value independent business owner.
Because on that empty plot of land, you are the CEO, the worker, and the accountant all simultaneously.
Exactly. So whether you are secretly prepping to quit your day job right now, or you're already deep in the trenches of the infamous feast or famine cycle, this deep dive is your blueprint. It's about taking back control of your time.
And what becomes immediately apparent when you aggregate the strategies of top performers in this space is this fundamental shift in how we value capability.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we are raised to believe that success is a direct byproduct of raw, unadulterated talent. Like, if you're the best designer, you win. But the data entirely refutes that.
It really does.
Yeah. Success in the independent landscape relies significantly less on being some creative genius and almost entirely on aggressive reliability. It's about the establishment of firm boundaries and deliberate clinical strategy.
Reliability over talent. Let's really dig into that because it radically changes the very first interaction you have with a potential client. I mean, the interview.
Right.
In the corporate skyscraper, an interview is an audition to prove you can fit into their existing culture. You're basically looking for an empty chair. But in the freelance world, you are stepping in as an external vendor.
You're a mercenary.
Exactly. A mercenary hired to solve a very specific problem.
You aren't joining their culture. You are neutralizing a pain point. And that dynamic shifts the power balance and the expectations, starting with the very first impression in a virtual meeting.
Right, the setup.
Yeah. The consensus on this is absolute. Your background must be sterile and professional. Your microphone has to be broadcast quality, and your internet connection must be bulletproof.
Which I know sounds like standard, almost pedestrian advice.
It does. But the underlying psychology is critical. When a client gets on a call with a freelancer, their baseline emotion is actually anxiety.
Because they're about to hand over their budget to a total stranger on the internet.
Precisely. They are subconsciously scanning the environment for risk.
They are actively looking for a reason to disqualify you.
You really are. So if your audio is crackling or there is visible chaos in your background, like laundry on a bed or people walking back and forth, it introduces cognitive friction.
Right. The client isn't just annoyed by the sound.
No, their brain is calculating a risk profile. They think, if this person cannot control their environment for a 30-minute pitch where they're supposed to be putting their best foot forward, what is going to happen when my project hits a critical bottleneck at 11:00 p.m. on a Friday?
It's pure risk mitigation. You could be the most gifted video editor or software engineer on the planet, but if your internet drops, the talent is entirely negated by the unreliability.
Because talent is a liability if it cannot be deployed predictably.
That is such a crucial point. So you've eliminated the environmental friction, you have the crisp audio, then comes the introduction. And there is a very strict rule here in the source material about how you define yourself.
The hyper niche.
Yes, you never lead with a broad category. You don't say, I'm a writer. You say, I'm a B2B SaaS technical writer.
Right, you don't say, I edit videos. You say, I am an expert retention editor for YouTube educators.
Oh.
You have to define exactly what you do in 5 words or less.
And why is that?
Well, it directly addresses a massive psychological hurdle. Why do clients pay a premium for specialists? Because businesses view generalists as raw materials.
Like a tool.
Exactly. Yeah. A generalist is a Swiss Army knife, and the client has to expend their own mental energy to figure out which blade to use and how to apply it to their problem. A specialist, however, is a laser scalpel.
I love that analogy.
The specificity of a niche inherently communicates high value because it signals that you have solved this exact problem in this exact industry dozens of times before.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's the difference between a general practitioner and a brain surgeon.
Oh, definitely.
Like if I wake up with a mild cough, I go to the general practitioner. It's low stakes. But if my vision is blurring and I have a highly specific, terrifying neurological issue, I do not want a generalist guessing at a diagnosis.
You want the person who operates on that one specific nerve all day, every day.
Exactly. I will pay whatever they ask, and I will not question their methodology.
And that is the exact economic transition freelancers must make. When you define your niche with extreme prejudice, you eliminate the client's anxiety. You transition from being a risky, ambiguous expense to being a targeted, safe investment.
But declaring you are the brain surgeon is really only step one.
Right, because the client isn't just going to take your word for it. They're going to demand to see the surgical history.
Yes. The most common first question in any of these initial meetings is inevitably, can you walk me through your portfolio?
And this is where the instinct to overprove oneself becomes a massive detriment. Well, the amateur treats their portfolio like an autobiographical archive of everything they've ever created since university. They want to prove they can do, everything.
Right.
But the strategy dictates a ruthless curation process. Quality is always paramount over quantity. But more importantly, relevance is paramount over quality.
You curate it to the specific audience.
Yes.
Like if you're pitching a sleek, minimalist fintech startup and your portfolio includes a wildly colorful, chaotic flyer you designed for a local music festival 3 years ago, you are actively sabotaging yourself.
Even if that flyer is objectively beautiful.
Exactly. Even if it's great, you are breaking the illusion of the niche. You are introducing doubt. You're showing them you are actually just the general practitioner playing dress up.
A portfolio is not a display of artistic range. It is a psychological tool designed to evoke one highly specific thought in the client's mind. And that thought is, they have already done exactly what I need them to do.
If an artifact in your portfolio does not serve that singular goal, it must be removed.
Period.
Okay, so you show them this hyper-curated gallery. They are leaning in. They love it. Then comes the operational question, turnaround time. How fast can you get this done?
Right.
The established rule here is to never promise a deadline you cannot comfortably meet. Underpromise and overdeliver. Better early than late.
Which loops us right back to the bedrock of reliability.
I hear that, but honestly, let's look at the reality of being on that empty plot of land. If I am a new freelancer, my pipeline is dry, and my rent is due in a week, my overwhelming instinct is going to be to promise the client I can do it overnight.
Sure.
But wait, if you are desperate for the job, isn't the temptation to promise it overnight just to secure the gig? Doesn't speed win the job? Aren't they going to go with the person who promises it by tomorrow morning?
They might, but it is an incredibly dangerous, short-sighted trap. Let's map out that scenario. You promise it overnight to secure the gig. The dopamine hits, you got the job.
Right, you're thrilled.
But then the reality of the work sets in. The source files are messy, the software crashes, You underestimate the render time, you deliver it 12 hours late.
Ouch.
In your mind, you worked a miraculous 36-hour shift to get it done. You think you are a hero, but in the client's mind, you simply failed to do what you explicitly said you would do.
Wow. So the narrative entirely shifts from they work so hard to they are unreliable.
Exactly. You have instantly destroyed the foundation of trust for a temporary win. A client is operating on a broader timeline than you are. They're coordinating with marketing, with development, with their own stakeholders.
They have a whole machine relying on that one piece.
Right. A client would infinitely prefer to hear, this will take 5 days to execute properly and receive it in 4, than hear, I can do it in 2 days and receive it in 3. The raw velocity of the work matters significantly less than the precise management of their expectations.
It's about protecting the client's emotional state. And speaking of their emotional state, eventually the interview will pivot to how you handle friction.
The inevitable question.
How do you handle revisions or negative feedback? And the strategic response here is to completely detach your ego. You say, I view feedback purely as a mechanism to make the project better.
Because in the corporate skyscraper, criticism is deeply tied to survival. If your boss criticizes your work, it feels like a threat to your promotion, your annual review, your job security.
It triggers a defensive posture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But in the independent space, you must sever that emotional link. The client isn't attacking your identity, they're just trying to calibrate the deliverable for their specific market. Defensiveness is a hallmark of the amateur.
You also see this in how you handle behavioral questions. Like, tell me about a time a project went wrong.
Right.
The tactic here is to relentlessly focus on the solution, not the drama. You say, the API integration failed on launch day, so I immediately wrote a custom script to bridge the data, and we are live within an hour. You don't dwell on who is to blame for the API failing.
Clients are buying problem solvers. They want to know that if a fire starts, you are grabbing an extinguisher, not calling them in a panic to ask where the water is.
It proves you do not require emotional or operational hand-holding.
Precisely.
All right. So you have expertly navigated the portfolio. You've established an aggressively reliable timeline. You've demonstrated absolute emotional maturity regarding feedback. Now we reach the absolute crucible of the interview.
The money game.
The money game. The dreaded question, what is your rate?
The primary failure point here is entering the conversation without a mathematical anchor. You must know the industry standards and your own internal floor before the camera even turns on.
You can't just wing it.
No. Making up a number on the spot based on the client's perceived wealth or your own momentary desperation is a recipe for disaster. But the deeper mechanical question is the structure of the pricing. Fixed versus hourly.
And the guidelines here are actually very elegant. You use a fixed price model when the parameters of the task are rigid and easily defined. Like, if I am hired to write a 1,500-word SEO article based on a provided brief, the start and end points are crystal clear. But an hourly rate is an absolute necessity when the project scope is murky.
Because the pricing structure is fundamentally about who assumes the risk.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. In a fixed price model, the freelancer assumes the risk. If it takes you 10 hours instead of 2, you eat the cost. In an hourly model, the client assumes the risk of the project taking longer than anticipated.
Right.
When a project is poorly defined, like, we need you to help us rethink our brand identity, you cannot assume the risk of an endless wandering exploration.
Because if you do, you open the door to the deadliest assassin of a freelance business, scope creep.
And scope creep is silent. It rarely happens all at once.
No, it sneaks up on you.
It manifests as a client saying, hey, while you're in that file, could you just quickly change the color palette? And actually, could you mock up a version for Instagram as well? Just a tiny tweak.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is exactly like an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Okay, I like this.
The client pays a fixed entry fee, and they walk in expecting unlimited access. If you do not hand them an a la carte menu before they start eating, meaning you strictly define exactly what that initial price covers, they will just keep walking up to the buffet line with an empty plate.
Expecting you to keep ladling on free work.
Exactly. You have to build the fence early. You have to look them in the virtual eye during the interview and state, this fixed price covers the initial delivery and a maximum of 3 rounds of revisions. Any further revisions will be billed at my hourly rate.
What is fascinating about establishing those boundaries is the psychological effect it has on the client.
Novice freelancers are terrified that drawing a hard line will anger the client.
Yeah, that it'll cost them the job. The reality is the exact opposite. Enforcing a boundary commands respect. It signals that you are an established professional who values your own time.
Which implicitly tells the client that your time is valuable. But let's say you lay out that perfectly structured, bounded price, and the client winces. They reveal they have a low budget. The immediate visceral panic response is to backpedal. Like, oh, your budget is $2,000. I quoted $4,000, but sure, I can do it for $2,000.
Doing that is catastrophic.
But wait, why? I mean, you still get the 2 grand.
Because you have instantly destroyed your own perceived value. By immediately dropping your price by 50% for the exact same amount of work, you are confessing to the client that your initial quote was a fabrication.
Oh, wow.
You'll be telling them, I tried to overcharge you, but you caught me. You lose all trust. The correct strategic maneuver when faced with a budget deficit is to hold the price, but reduce the scope.
You take items off the buffet plate.
Exactly. You say, I understand your budget is firmly capped at $2,000. I cannot execute the full scope of this project for that amount without compromising the quality of my work. However, for $2,000, I can deliver phase 1 and phase 2, and we can revisit the remainder next quarter.
That is a masterclass in negotiation.
It really is. It demonstrates flexibility and a desire to collaborate, but it violently protects your baseline value.
And the psychology of the pricing numbers themselves is wild. Like if you are selling a low-tier product, ending the price in like $99 or $499 triggers a retail heuristic in the brain.
Right. It feels cheaper.
It feels like a discount. But if you are positioning yourself as the brain surgeon offering premium high-end services, you must use clean, round numbers.
Quoting $5,000 feels authoritative.
Yeah. Quoting $4,997 for a comprehensive corporate rebrand feels slightly manipulative, like a late-night infomercial.
Which leads us directly into the great paradox of freelance pricing. It is profoundly counterintuitive, but the data bears it out across every industry.
The high-paying clients.
Yes, high-paying clients are almost universally easier to work with, while low-paying clients are consistently the most demanding, hypercritical, and boundary-pushing.
That makes zero logical sense on the surface. I mean, you would think the person paying you $10,000 would be breathing down your neck, demanding perfection every hour, and the person paying you $500 would be chill. Why is it the inverse?
Because of the psychological state driving the purchase. A client who enthusiastically pays a premium rate is paying for peace of mind.
Right.
They have the capital, and they are using it to buy back their own time and mental bandwidth. They are paying you specifically so they do not have to think about the problem anymore. They trust your expertise, so they step back and let you work.
That makes total sense.
Conversely, a client who aggressively haggles for the absolute cheapest rate is operating from a mindset of deep scarcity and anxiety. Because the money represents a massive risk to them, they attempt to mitigate that risk by micromanaging every single keystroke. They do not trust you because they don't trust the amount they paid you.
That is profound. Charging too little traps you in a race to the bottom where everyone is miserable. But charging a premium creates a self-fulfilling prophecy of quality. If you charge top dollar, you aren't rushing to finish the job so you can start the next one to make rent. You have the financial breathing room to actually sit down, focus, and deliver exceptional work.
Which is why the continuous raising of rates is not just greedy, It is a mechanical necessity for a healthy business. You should be raising your rates annually, and when you do, some of your legacy, low-paying clients will leave.
And that feels like a failure to a lot of people. Losing a client feels like you did something wrong.
But it is not a failure. It is the shedding of a cocoon. If a client leaves because your quality and pricing have scaled beyond their budget, it simply means you have outgrown them.
Right.
It creates a vacuum that will be filled by clients who operate at your new level.
Okay, so the negotiation is a triumph. The scope is defined. The premium price is agreed upon. The client is happy. A lot of freelancers at this point will just send an email saying, "Great, I'll get started Monday," and dive into the work.
A huge mistake.
Right, because that is how you end up standing in the rain. To truly build the skyscraper, we have to look at the unglamorous, highly administrative mechanics of the business. The contracts, the tools, the legal scaffolding.
This is the exact moment the transition from worker to CEO must occur. The cardinal rule of the onboarding process is absolute zero work is executed without a fully executed written contract.
No exceptions.
None. A verbal agreement is a hallucination. An email thread saying "sounds good" is a massive liability.
I think people avoid contracts because they feel inherently adversarial. It feels like you are assuming the client is going to screw you over.
You have to reframe that entirely. A contract is not a weapon. It is an externalized memory.
An externalized memory. I love that.
Yeah, human memory is remarkably fragile and biased. 6 weeks into a complex project, the client genuinely might not remember if you agreed to 3 revisions or 4. A contract removes the need for human memory. It objectively states the project scope, the payment terms, and the termination protocol.
Let's talk about those payment terms, specifically the deposit. The standard structure is 50% upfront to commence work and 50% upon final delivery. And the rule here is aggressive. If a client refuses to pay a deposit, you do not take the job.
The deposit is the ultimate filter. A client who balks at a deposit is a glaring neon red flag indicating future cash flow manipulation.
They're basically asking you to finance their project.
Exactly. They are saying they want you to finance their project with your free labor until they decide they are satisfied. As an independent operator, you are not a bank. The deposit ensures the client has immediate skin in the game.
And trying to chase down an invoice after the work is delivered using a formal notice of payment or a collection service later is just a soul-crushing waste of your time.
Prevention is better than a cure, every time.
Now, the other major component of the contract is the termination clause. Usually it stipulates a 7 to 14-day written notice required by either party to terminate the agreement. But I have to ask, doesn't sliding a termination clause across the table kill the honeymoon phase?
How do you mean?
I mean, everyone is excited to start, and you are immediately bringing up how the divorce is going to work. Is a termination clause really necessary if everyone seems happy at the start?
It might induce a brief moment of corporate awkwardness, but it is absolute professional self-defense. Remember, you do not have the safety net of corporate HR. You don't have severance pay.
That's true.
In the modern business environment, a client's budget can be frozen overnight. Their CMO could be fired, and the new CMO might cancel all external vendor contracts. If that happens without a termination clause, your income from that client drops to absolute zero instantaneously.
Wow, yeah.
A 14-day clause forces them to pay you for 2 more weeks, buying you a crucial window to scramble, market yourself, and fill the pipeline.
It is the parachute. Okay, so the contract is signed, the deposit hits the bank account. Let's talk about the literal physical and digital infrastructure you need to execute. The tools of the trade. If you are running a business, you have to capitalize the business.
This is often overlooked. You need a fast computer, computing power that does not bottleneck your workflow. You need premium software tailored to your niche, high-end software for designers, grammar checkers for writers.
Right.
But perhaps the most surprising yet vital piece of infrastructure is an ergonomic chair.
I love that this makes the list of critical business strategies a chair.
Think about the mechanics of your operation. Your physical body is the primary engine of your entire enterprise. In a traditional job, if your back seizes up from sitting on a cheap stool for a year, you take paid sick leave. The company absorbs the cost of your breakdown.
But on the empty plot of land,
On the empty plot of land, if you cannot sit at your desk, your revenue production ceases immediately. Investing in ergonomics isn't a luxury. It is a critical operational safeguard. It saves your back.
you are protecting the machine, and then there is the digital infrastructure. The administrative load of running a business is staggering. You are tracking tasks, tracking time, sending invoices. The strategy here is to utilize software that not only organizes you, but also projects immense professionalism to the client. Using a platform like Trello or Asana for task tracking isn't just about you remembering what to do, it's about transparency.
Clients appreciate professional systems. It is an anxiety reduction tool. When you invite a client to an Asana board, they can visually see the gears turning. They see tasks moving from in progress to review. They don't have to email you asking for an update because the progress is transparent.
Then you have time tracking software like Clockify. Even if you are billing on a fixed rate, you have to track your time to understand your own internal profitability.
Admin work takes us a surprising amount of time.
It really does. If you charge $1,000 for a project and you think it took 10 hours, you made $100 an hour. But if Clockify reveals you actually spent 20 hours on it because of endless admin and email, your rate drops to $50 an hour. You have to know the math.
And regarding the final step of the transaction, the invoice, the psychology, is friction reduction. Using platforms like Wave or PayPal to generate professional invoices with a Pay Now button is essential.
Make it one click easy.
Exactly. If a client has to physically write a check, find a stamp and mail it, or log into their banking portal to set up a manual wire transfer, you're introducing friction. Friction delays action.
Yeah.
Make handing over the money a frictionless experience.
And once that money arrives, we hit the heaviest reality check of all: taxes and insurance. The golden rule is brutal but necessary. You set aside 25% to 30% of every single payment immediately for taxes.
Yes.
You do not look at it. You do not consider it your money. You hire a professional accountant or use robust software, and you keep business and personal money strictly separate.
Because the moment those funds commingle, you pierce the corporate veil, creating massive liability. And having professional liability insurance is just for your own peace of mind.
This entire segment regarding tools, contracts, and taxes illustrates a profound conceptual leap.
The realization that working on your business is just as vital as working in your business.
Yes, doing the actual graphic design or writing the code or editing the video that is working in the business. You are the employee executing the task. But setting up the Asana board, optimizing the invoice template, reviewing your tax strategy that is working on the business, you are the CEO building the factory floor.
If you spend 100% of your time working in the business, generating deliverables, your structural foundation will eventually collapse under the weight of administrative chaos. You must aggressively carve out time to be the CEO.
So the factory floor is built, the systems are humming, the paperwork is ironclad, but business is never just about systems. It is fundamentally about human beings. Let's pivot into client psychology and relationship management, because even with the best contracts, friction is inevitable.
The overarching philosophy of client management is proactive communication. It is the single most effective tool for managing the client's emotional state.
I use the check engine light analogy for this.
Oh, let's hear it.
When a client hires you and pays that initial deposit, their internal check engine light immediately turns on. They are in the dark. They don't know what you are doing.
That anxiety again.
Exactly. The strategy here is to tell them exactly when you will update them, right at the kickoff. You say, I will send you a comprehensive progress report every Friday. That Friday email is a diagnostic check. It turns the check engine light off. It allows the client to actually relax and enjoy their weekend, knowing the project is under control.
It creates a cadence of trust. And this proactive management is also how you navigate the very common, very dangerous free sample trap.
Oh, yes. Beginners fall for this all the time.
Clients will frequently ask for spec work, asking you to work for free with the promise that if they like it, they will hire you for the massive, lucrative main project.
Do this logo for free, and if my boss likes it, we have 10 more for you. How do you say no without insulting a potentially huge client?
You never do the work for free, but you also don't just aggressively say no. You reframe the request. You suggest a paid trial instead. You say, I don't engage in speculative work, but I highly recommend a paid trial. We can carve out a micro project for a reduced flat fee. This allows us to test our working dynamic.
It's a brilliant pivot. Professional clients respect it because they know quality costs money. The ones who get angry and walk away were never going to pay you for the big project anyway.
You're just farming free labor.
Hmm.
Now, what about the client who pays but then turns into a micromanager?
Right, the one who wants to be in the Google Doc watching you type.
Exactly. You have to set expectations early. You say, I will provide updates twice a week. Please allow me to work in between. You enforce the boundary.
And when a project inevitably hits a wall, you know those moments where you are 8 emails deep into a thread, no one understands what the other person is saying, and frustration is boiling over?
The advice here is a hard stop on text-based communication. You asked for a quick 10-minute call. Voice and tone clear up misunderstandings faster than 20 emails. You just say, I just want to make sure we are on the same page.
Because text strips away nuance, tone, and empathy. A confusing email reads as aggressive or incompetent. A 10-minute phone call instantly diffuses the tension.
We also have to address the reality of making mistakes. You miss a detail, you break a piece of code.
The instinct is to hide it.
But the data strongly suggests radical accountability. Be entirely honest, apologize without caveats, and fix it immediately. Owning mistake builds more long-term trust than maintaining an illusion of flawlessness.
There is also a fascinating psychological tactic mentioned for day-to-day communication mirroring.
Mirroring is a subconscious rapport-building technique. You analyze the client's communication style and adopt it. If their emails are highly formal, you reply with structure and formality. If they are casual, you loosen up your tone to match. People inherently trust people who feel like them.
But there is a strict limit to that reflection. The strategy warns heavily against adopting confusing corporate jargon just to sound smart. Acronyms like CTA, ROI, KPI.
Avoid them unless explained clearly. Simplicity is a sign of true expertise. If you cannot explain your complex process to a client using simple language, it means you do not understand the mechanics well enough yourself.
And fortunately, no amount of mirroring or simple language can save every relationship. We have to talk about toxic or difficult clients, the ones who are abusive, who constantly threaten to withhold payment.
The protocol for toxicity is absolute. Stay professional, don't argue, focus entirely on the facts in the contract, finish the job, and never work with them again.
Protect your peace of mind. Cut the cord. But what about a client who isn't toxic, just wildly disorganized? They come to you in a panic on Thursday night and need a rush project by Monday morning.
This is where you implement the rush fee. You charge a 20% rush fee because it takes away from your sleep or your family. You financially disincentivize chaos.
And finally, in the realm of client relations ghosting, you send a proposal, they seem excited, and then silence. The instinct is to keep chasing them.
The strategy says, send one polite follow-up, like, I am checking in to see if you have any updates. There's no reply, move on. Don't waste energy on cold leads.
Which is the perfect transition. We know how to handle the clients we have and how to dump the bad ones. But how do you scale up? How do you find better clients and ensure you never run out of work? Let's unpack marketing, growth, and the evolution of your skill set.
The first step in scaling is geographical. You have to change where you are looking. You need to look outside low-cost platforms like Upwork or Fiverr, where competition is incredibly high.
Right.
Use LinkedIn to connect directly with marketing managers and decision makers.
This introduces the grand debate of marketing inbound versus outbound. Inbound is the dream state. You post knowledge regularly on LinkedIn, and clients come to you.
But inbound marketing takes time to build momentum. In the beginning, growth requires outbound marketing. And outbound means the terrifying reality of sending cold emails.
Outbound is scary, but necessary at first. But this strategy provides a massive reframe, keep it short, and offer value first. You don't ask for a job. Your hook is something like, I noticed your website has a slow loading speed. I can help you fix that to increase sales.
You are leading with a diagnosis and a solution. Now, if you're responding to open requests for proposals, the metric that dictates success is speed. Speed wins.
On Upwork, the first to reply has a 50% better chance.
Exactly. Use templates, but customize them. Mention a specific detail from their brief in the first sentence, like, I saw you need a logo for a sustainable coffee brand. It proves human attention.
And once you execute the work and thrill the client, you must harvest social proof. Reviews are gold. Always ask, if you are happy with my work, would you mind leaving a review?
Even more potent are video testimonials. 30-second clips are powerful magnets for new business.
You also have to be ready to market yourself in the physical world. The elevator pitch. You need to practice explaining your value in 30 seconds. Like, I help small businesses grow their online presence. Be ready at coffee shops or weddings, but don't be pushy.
This holistic approach feeds into what is known as the authority to trusted jobs pipeline. Building a network from zero means helping people for free on forums like Reddit or Quora. Authority is a long-term game.
And once you harvest those high-end clients, you have to focus on upselling and retention. When you send final files, say thank you and ask, is there anything else I can help with?
Offer package deals for recurring work. 3 long-term clients are vastly superior to 10 short-term ones. Stay top of mind with holiday notes and ask for referrals.
But to keep those top-tier clients engaged, your skills have to evolve. Which brings us to upgrading skills and becoming a T-shaped professional.
I love this concept. Combine skills to become T-shaped deep knowledge in one area, which is the vertical stem of the T, and broad knowledge in others, the horizontal bar. For example, a writer who also knows SEO, or a coder who understands UI/UX.
So what does this all mean? I compare the T-shaped professional to a Swiss Army knife where the main blade is extremely sharp, but the extra tools make it indispensable. It makes you harder to replace.
And as you reach that level of indispensability, you hit a ceiling. How do you diversify and scale? Everyone thinks of passive income.
Right. Ebooks, courses.
But passive income takes a lot of active work to set up. You can also outsource small tasks to other freelancers to scale. But you have to remember that you are responsible for the final quality.
Which forces a long-term vision question. Do you stay solo or build an agency? Managing people means a completely different stress and higher income.
You have to decide what you want.
Which is the perfect bridge. We've built an incredible, profitable business machine. But what is the toll on the human operating that machine?
The psychological toll. Mindset, burnout, and self-care.
The baseline psychological stressor is the feast or famine cycle. Some days are busy, some are quiet. The advice is to save money during the busy times. But the psychological challenge requires the freelance mindset.
You are the boss and the employee. If the employee is lazy, the boss goes broke. No one will tell you to get out of bed.
And remote work violently compounds this. It levels the playing field. Small towns can work for big cities, but it requires super power level, clear written communication since most work is text and email.
And distractions at home are dangerous. You need a dedicated workspace and a strict schedule.
To manage time, the material recommends the Pomodoro technique. 25 minutes of work, a 5-minute break. It avoids overwhelm.
And use eat the frog, do the hardest task first thing in the morning.
But burnout is the ultimate predator. Your mental health is your most important asset. Without it, you can't deliver quality work. Take breaks, walk outside.
We have to talk about the guilt of being idle in a freelance business. While there is always something to do, allowing yourself to rest without guilt is critical because guilt is a productivity killer.
The paradox of freedom. You become a freelancer for freedom, but you end up having to be stricter with yourself than a corporate boss ever would be.
True freedom demands discipline. Set a closing time for your laptop. The brain needs to switch off.
Get a hobby entirely disconnected from computers. Gardening, hiking, cooking, playing guitar, you need it to recharge creative batteries. Changing scenery, like working from cafes, can also spark ideas.
And regarding PTO, you don't get holiday pay. Add a small percentage to your rates to cover your own vacations.
And if you're afraid to start as a side hustle while you have a job to reduce financial pressure. Don't quit your day job until your side job pays the bills.
It transitions the leap of faith into a calculated move.
We have covered so much. To summarize, the source distills successful freelancing into 4 keys: specialized skills, great communication, consistency, and responding quickly.
And walk into every interaction with confidence. You are a professional solving problems, not a beggar asking for a favor.
As we close this deep dive, here's a final thought for you. The source material notes that freelancing is fundamentally about taking back control of your time, our most limited resource. So if you manage to implement all these boundaries, tools, and pricing strategies to win back 2 extra hours a day, what are you actually going to do with that time? Does building the perfect business eventually obscure the life it was meant to give you freedom to live?
That's a powerful question.
Don't spend years escaping the corporate skyscraper just to build a new, smaller skyscraper and voluntarily lock yourself inside of it. Remember that your potential is limited only by your imagination. We'll catch you on the next one.